things meant to be is the ancestors' breath. When the fire's voices groan, is the ancestors' breath in the voice of the water. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead are not under the earth.
Please stand.
That's a lot easier said than done.
On the bridge, work forward. By the right, quick, mop.
Recover! Ready, face! All uniform personnel, present arms! Order, arms! Ready, face!
3 hills, 3-4. By the right, quick, mop.
Forward! March!
Please be seated. Well, hi. I'm David Summer. For those that don't know, you may not know me. I'm really lucky because I know most of you, and it's great to see so many great people. We're here to honor Mike Lohrey, and we need to do that to support the family, remember the good things, the laughter, which we need to put in the room. Bill, you're on deck. And it's about remembering a great person. Mike was born in Klamath Falls to Robert and Peggy Lohrey, raised in Lake Tahoe, Nevada. Mike was known for being passionate skier, fly fisherman, and hunter. Some of Mike's many happy places were fly fishing the Rogue River, pheasant hunting in Montana, antelope hunting in Wyoming, or any black run, but especially at Heavenly Valley, Tahoe. As a dedicated public servant, Mike touched a great many lives through 46 years of leadership, management, and training that pay it forward. That was done under the umbrella of the United States Forest Service, but the strength of the fire community is an interagency community, both wildland, structural, anyone who wants to be part of the solution. Mike obtained his Bachelor of Science in Forestry Watershed Management. He went on to pursue getting his master's degree in the same, in hydrology and forestry. He started his career a little bit before me, that's good. In 1970, his first 4 years on a fire crew, engine crew in Tioga National Forest. Mike always had this blend between academia and natural resources and leadership and fire. It's fascinating to think in 1975 he was an assistant professor at the University of Nevada in Reno. In 1977, he became an assistant hydrologist for the Pacific Northwest region, which is the states of Washington and Oregon, as the Forest Service is broken out into the geographic landscape. 1978 through 1986, he was the forest hydrologist for the Fremont National Forest, which many of you and some of you will share some stories about those days and the excitement of having a feet on the ground and projects and resource management and feeling good at the end of the day and maybe having a coffee or ice water, or maybe with most of this it's a good gin and tonic, but anyway. He then took his skill set and went to the Mount Hood. So from 1986 to 1991, he was the forest hydrologist. He was respected amongst his peers in that line of work and achieved the Water Resource Program Manager for the whole region in 1991 to 2001. What's fascinating about this, and you'll hear the story as others speak and I'll bring it to light, but Mike really came into the Forest Service and a natural resource agenda, interest, love of the land, and trying to make a difference. Also had interest and commitment into the fire and aviation world. 2001 to 2009, he actually served as a natural resources and a fire aviation specialist. Discussions and decisions between our directors and regional forester and funding sources, just because anything he leaned into got done. For laughter, which I need, Bill Otani. Come on down, buddy.
Thank you all. It's really great to see a lot of you out here because a lot of my friends are my friends too. So it's great seeing you all. I just was asked to talk a little bit about the Mike Lohrey in the early years. And so the Mike Lohrey that I knew you could say how many years, but I measure it differently. I've known Mike through 6 dogs. So when you think about it, think back to your friends and who they are and how many dogs they had, whether it be Shadow, Michelle would know, all the way to Zorro. I've been with them all and I've enjoyed them all. Okay, so that's a little bit of my longevity with him, but to talk about his college years. When I first met Mike, we were freshmen in college. And college and studying academic excellence wasn't necessarily in our in our primary zone. And I used to laugh because Mike used to say, I'm a fun-loving guy and I like to party hardy. And that is kind of how we lived. And you know, when you think about the kind of person he was, what kind of car did he drive? He had like a Roadrunner, and then he went to a Triumph Spitfire. So think about who drives a Roadrunner or a Triumph Spitfire. That kind of gives you an indication of what they're like. One of the best stories I heard from Mike was he came back from Tahoe with being with some of his buddies, and he talked about going out partying with them. And one of his buddies, George Kincaid, came back and they were eating at the Jim Boy Tacos in South Lake Tahoe. And he said he looked over at George and he had done a face plant, which is another word for passed out, in the Jim Boy's daughter. And they let him sit there for a while and then they extricated him. Am I right, Michelle?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. So that was kind of the first indication that I knew that this guy was serious about some stuff, but not necessarily academic. Later on, as time went, he got more serious. And when he got more serious, I think it reflected in his cars, because then he started driving a Ford Fairlane and a VW. But that didn't stop us from having fun, because I remember one trip we had where we'd tell all our guys, hey, we're going out to the Mustang Ranch. And the reason we went out there was because there was some really good quail hunting along the coast. Now, some might not believe that, but that was the truth. And so we went on this one trip, and we had to borrow Michelle's Volkswagen. And we borrowed Michelle's Volkswagen because our cars weren't running. And we drove out to towards the Mustang Ranch, and we were hunting. We spent the day hunting in the hills. We were way back there. We got a flat. And we were sitting there going, oh great, no problem. So we went to change the tire, but Michelle had no spare in the car. So we were trying to figure out, how are we going to get this car back? We're way back in the boonies. And Mike said, hey, no problem. So we took the flat wheel, put it on the front left side of the car. We put everything we could own into the rear, and we drove that car out some 12 miles down we just beat the snot out of it. What I learned from him is Mike was fearless, not just to drive this car 12 miles down this, rocky road, but he was fearless because he just returned the car back to his sister.
Was that before or after the back bumper was gone?
After he started to get serious about school, that's when I kind of didn't study with him like I used to. Before, when Mike said, let's study, it was yeah, okay, I'll bring the sunflower seeds and you bring the beer. And we would sit there. But after a while, it became like he really got serious about it, and that's when I quit studying with him. And when we were working together, it was really interesting because people started recognizing Mike for some of his skill sets, and he was running the project crew on the district. And the project crew, well, our nickname was the Odd Crew, because there were a different menagerie of people, and he had to get them all together and keep them working. And it was really amazing that he could turn some of those folks into productive and working people. But he was successful at it. And when the fire bell went off, you know, they would always call the project group back in those days as one of the first folks to respond to them. So early on, Mike was thrust into that position of fighting fire, and it was really always interesting to see him leading his crew, and was very effective at it. And I think people realized that, and you could tell he really enjoyed it. I could go on and tell all kinds of stories about Mike, but I know that there were a few things that he was so passionate about when he was young and throughout life, whether it be his hunting, like that Dave mentioned, or his fishing or his skiing. I know he loved it, and I remember him skiing with Jess, his daughter, and taking her down those black diamond runs, and I would say, you know, how could you do that to your daughter? And he goes, what do you mean? I have a hard time keeping up. And he would be so happy and pleased about spending those times with her. So I guess we're going to probably hear a lot about his fire life and his life, but I know that a lot of people didn't realize how passionate he was about resource management. And I know him being a hydrologist and seeing him work through the forest plans and seeing him do all these other activities. It was really nice to see that. And later on, even as an IC, when we have those discussions and resource values and things like that, those values, you know, came through all the time. And I know when we were doing back burns and things like that, and he would always comment about different people and their skill sets. You know, I remember him saying, you know, we got to get John to back that one down because he's got the patience and he'll do the job that we want to see on the ground. And I always admire those folks in the leadership position to understand those folks with those special skill sets, and Mike was great for that. And I also know that one thing he truly cared about was the people. And I think that him having the ability to bring a bunch of different people together and get them into a cohesive group was some of the characteristics, that made him such a good IC, but also as a good friend, and has also made him just an all-around good guy. So, Dave, I don't want to take too much more time. Thank you all.
Bill is such an amazing guy, and it's good to see some smiles. So that's important. So, speaking of fire career, let's look into that a little bit. What was interesting is Mike was getting recognized for his intelligence, his communication skills, his ability to get things done. He decided to act within the world of fire and aviation management, and that means you come to an incident commander either through a few steps: appreciation, skill sets. Operation skills are essential and critical, not to dwell on a fire career ladder. But what was interesting, by the mid-90s, Mike had gotten himself in a position where he could start serving as an incident commander for what we call an area team. So the biggest, most challenging incidents in our country are managed by Type 1 teams. A Type 2 team is usually then has a geographic area of expertise in that day. Now the expectations of those teams, because of scope and scale and need for emergency response and fires, change. But in the days of the 90s, Mike was then the incident commander in Central Oregon. And that's when I started serving with Mike as part of the command staff and safety, and you start building relationships and you have challenges, and when you come back and have a hot wash and you talk about stuff, those things stick with you, you know, and all the successes that you have, and how you can motivate people, and how you can get a community to trust you, and how can you come in and provide order to chaos, and how can you tell people who are watching their community, their church, their home, their friends, be in harm's way. How do you orchestrate, delegate, have people work within their areas of expertise? And he started doing that in the mid-90s. You know, and what we'll hear at the end of the story, he has 25 years of that. On top of the 20 years on natural resources, which is why I suggested a 46-year career. I know I missed 1 year there for you folks that like math. So serving with Mike was a privilege. I also had the opportunity on the Type 1 team, and then was in a position where I was asked to stand down from teams and do other kind of work. It isn't about me, but all of the people in this room that have fire experience either served with or for, or had an opportunity to work with people who are like-minded. There's a lot of great instant commanders, area commanders in here that want to honor Mike by being here, which is great. He then served as the deputy IC. We have 2 national teams in the Pacific Northwest, which is Washington and Oregon. 2 of the 16 teams that served across the country, and then started serving internationally. And he served for 2 years as the deputy IC with what's called Pacific Northwest Incident, the Interagency Incident Team 3. Short version, there's Team 3 and Team 2. We won't talk about what happened to Team 1. I'd have to buy drinks. But what it was is it allowed him to demonstrate his leadership skills with another group of people and earn their trust, respect, and then get evaluated to see whether or not he should and move forward with his own team, which occurred then in 2001, which was the year of 9/11, and many other incidents that we went on. He continued to be the incident commander for Team 2, I believe, through 2006. There's other people in the room now that have carried that torch, that have served in those same capacities, that learned from Mike, and it's really an awesome revolving door of expertise, skills, passionate people. In those 6 years, you frequently heard of incident teams working on large-scale fires. What was the nuance was when we went to 9/11, as well as Joe Stutler's team, 2 other teams from Arizona, and you'll hear a little bit about 9/11. We don't want to dwell on that. The point being is when we started working on challenges in the country and they looked at the skills, communications, leadership, organization, planning, logistics, medical support, to be given the chance to work in 9/11 setting, all of a sudden national recognition came that this group, 16 different teams, have skill sets that can help when there's a challenge within a community. That then went to hurricanes, supporting hurricanes, which we went on many. You know, that started presenting itself. Well, we had the shuttle recovery, which was a fascinating responsibility in eastern Texas. The common thread through some of those things is organization, getting goals set, having an objective, organizing people, expecting discipline, reporting, structure, finances, planning. And we were actually held in high regard and compete with the same kind of skill necessary in a kind of paramilitary setting where you need to get in, take care of that. But the one thing we could do is we could do it quickly. Our peers, there's many times that we could have a complete incident camp set up in 24 to 36 hours and do the tasks that those local leaders, land managers wanted, et cetera, et cetera. You know, if there's two fires and get a fire person going, it's like, stop. But we had Biscuit, a fire in Southwest Oregon, you know, that should a fire get to be 500,000 acres plus? Should a fire there have 5 incident teams? Should a fire have 5,700 personnel? Yes, no, what is necessary now as that's played out over the last, since that time, you know, 20-some years, large-scale fires. Cedar was another. Many of us in this room are on that. That was outside of San Diego. You know, 2,000, north of 2,000 homes were burned. 13 people were killed by that fire. We had 3 hours where the fire advanced 120,000 acres. So, skill set, matching that with expectations, what we could do. Mike was the team lead for all. He then went on to take the next challenge, which often area command then is a tier in the organization that when there's many teams that could be on the same area, or prioritization of critical resources, or the line officer is overwhelmed by, hey, can you help he or she with this challenge? Area command became part of our organization leadership model, and he served then as an area commander as one of the 3 in the nation in 2007, ending his career in 2009 as far as a retirement from the federal service with the U.S. Forest Service. Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. So help to hear another voice and put a kind of transition between this life on the forest and leadership roles. I'd like to invite Alan Guthridge to come up and share some reflections.
Thank you, David. Well, I want to say a few things that I know about Mike. Some of you probably do, and some of you might not. One of the things that was really interesting is that Pat over there, so we'll talk about that just a little bit. I first met Mike when he was the hydrologist on the Fremont National Forest. And Mike loved to hunt, and he loved to fish. And his office was decorated with many mementos of enjoyable outdoor activities. So that was kind of a natural magnet. So I always tried to make a chance to stop by for a visit with Mike when passing through the supervisor's office. And Mike gave me some pretty good ideas of how I could improve my fly fishing success. We spent a little time talking about this. Our paths crossed again in the 1990s when I had the privilege of working with Mike on incident management teams, and eventually becoming a member of Mike's Team 2. We shared many great adventures across the United States, some of which have been referenced, but lots of wildfire assignments, which included learning how to paddle a canoe to fight fire, which is a new one for a lot of people. We all did that mandatory training and got our feet wet. We did some hurricane recovery assistance, and as David said, the Columbia Shuttle recovery, which is quite an honor. Mike, no matter what we did, or where we went, Mike was always up to the challenge, and he always retained his focus on bringing order to chaos. Mike's motto was humble professionalism. And humble professionalism is how he managed the incident management team and the team working with the local leaders, and helping them understand how they could be successful in getting control of the emergency situation. Sometimes those folks were completely overwhelmed, and sometimes they had some difficult personalities. But Mike always seemed to retain his demeanor and just humble professionalism, and help them understand how they too could bring order to chaos. Mike had great respect for the firefighters and the crews under his command, and he always made time to listen to them and to meet with them and to address their needs and concerns, any concerns they might have. My first crew leader meetings that were formally done on the incident management team were the first ones that I attended with Mike, and that was just one of the things that Mike did. So Mike was a great leader, and he was a good friend. I have lots of good memories. We had always had really good coffee. Thanks to Mr. Bill and Firefighter Team 2 blend. We had off duty, of course, or, visiting each other. We had really good single malt scotch. Had a lot of good conversations, a lot of good times. So, I know that's why we're all here today. Mike will always be missed.
Thanks, Alan. I was told that some folks on the edges are having a harder time hearing, so those of us speakers eat the mic a little more and help them out some. So. Chapter 3 that I'd like to serve up is Mike liked to teach. It seems like that might be a lost skill right now on how important it is to impart knowledge, skills, and abilities to those that are interested in or in the need for doing that. Mike's love to teach when somebody showed the interest to learn was extremely evident at any level. You have to manage your time. You need to know just how many people you can help make a difference. But there's many of us that can speak to a chance that said, hey, you know, you made me think, you made me wonder. He was really active as an instructor, and you'll hear more about how he continued to do that for many years after retiring. But what I can help share a little bit is we have a lot of courses, alphabet soup, and oh my God, it drove me nuts even when I was a director. Hey, how are things going with, you know, blah, 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 and I said, just talk English. But anyway, I'm going to talk English here. It was really important to us to depart a set of skills to the people who are going to be asked to take on the most challenging incidents in the country. And not everybody, just because you go, should necessarily pass. I'm of that vintage. And with Mike, that if we're going to train for 2 weeks and then it got short up to be a little bit shorter than that, we needed that command and general staff to meet the challenge. And we would be in a training room facility. We'd go to Arizona, ran in the day, and then out in Afri, that training center in Tucson, sorry, alphabet soup. But the point is about this, and what's important, is it was critical for Mike to reach out to the cadre and say, what is it that needs to be taught that I could bring voice to the room and get people to think? And then it got to a point where if we're going to challenge people that come to demonstrate they have the abilities, it's safe, you make a mistake, there's no consequence, because this is in a laboratory setting, so to speak. He then switched his energy to being an evaluator. Very tough job, because people who are coming there obviously have 15, 20, 25 years of experience, hoping to achieve the certification so that then they can go out and serve. And I know sometimes people aren't quite ready or didn't have a chance to demonstrate that skill, or the tough love is, I think you've peaked, you should be happy with where you're at. Well, Mike did that, which required documentation, talking to bosses, talking to regional foresters. And unfortunately, we have had suicides when people haven't passed. It's heavy. What's good about it is that was the environment to make men and women leaders. That's a gift that Mike stepped up and did. There's probably a dozen of people in here that have done that too, and they get it. Sorry about that. The other thing that he loved to do and teach was international. So he got a chance to go to Lebanon, thanks, India, and Sri Lanka. And I can share a snippet of that because I was his co-leader when we went to Sri Lanka. And we followed 2004 was 35,000 people lost their lives in a tsunami in that country. Their government reached out to ask for help. And how could you help teach command and control, or help look into our social, economical, political situation and give us a gift of how you might be able to be successful. Man, was that awesome. You know, the willingness to learn, it was comparable to our Department of Homeland Security plus, short of the country's president. But they wanted to know what else they could do. Now, in a third world setting, we want to have whistles to teach kids to go to the higher ground, which might have been 50 feet higher than they would, they'd be alive or dead. So, you know, think about it. It's a whole different opportunity, but how do you structure it? They liked what Mike's leadership did. They asked us to stay another week, it got approved, and then we went to the university, and all the non-governmental organization volunteer groups, which was in excess of 200, came to learn the same thing. So they were looking at how they could support their government, and we were there in 05, so 4 years following 9/11, and that's all they wanted to talk about, because that was more relevant to them than a large-scale fire on Sri Lanka. But to help me get my breath, one of the things, we were there for 2 weeks, we got a chance to be there on the weekend, got a chance to go to, we had to go to the embassy to find out where it was safe to be, because the Tamil Tigers were there, and they were offloading 10 Americans a day were being killed, and so that added a little more challenge. You know, we had machine gun nests in front of our hotels, but that aside, you know, you always have these little extra colorful things. We went to an elephant orphanage, so awesome. You know, it was, you walk them through the town, and then there's a path to diversion, and all the people who were visiting go up and have lunch, you know, and have King's beer. I can remember that in Sri Lanka. Well, I was the biggest, whitest dude there. And I was wondering, maybe I'm going to be an easy target. Well, anyway, I don't know if that's the right name, the herder for the elephants asked me if I would engage with the elephants and wash them. I'm going, what? He had a 5-gallon bucket, so I go left, Mike moves up, and we go down to a river, and I'm with all these elephants. And so I start throwing water on them with a bucket, and they start shooting me. World-class water pistol fight. You know, and Mike was going, my God, I was worried, where'd you go? You know, we had gone through, anyway, that helped me realize, you know, I wasn't in Kansas. But I was with Mike, and we had an opportunity to share, listen, you know, teach, and make a difference. He loved that. He loved that. I had to say that to get composure. So, in 2009 through 2020, Mike's passion and interest to continue to teach and make a difference led to him being an associate within the organization of Organizational Quality Associates. And to speak to that, and a dear friend of Mike, I yield to have Mike Enriching come up and share his reflections. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, David. And if you can't hear in the back, raise your hand, David. Okay. You know, we all had different relationships with Mike. We worked with him, and we were with him in different environments. And I got to share a lot of those. I was very, very fortunate with the experiences and the different roles and relationships I had with Mike. A little bit different than a lot of folks. In his day-to-day job with Forest Service, he worked for me twice, once on the Mount Hood National Forest and one in the BLM Forest Service State and Regional Office. So at one point he was an employee. He was excellent. He was someone I could go to. He was also someone, along with some of his friends like Bill Atani, when they'd come in my office, I'd actually listen to them because they knew what they were talking about. Mike also got to work for me as an agency administrator when his incident management team would come to my forest. Again, I was happy to have him. And as an area commander, I was really tickled to have Mike and his team.
when we had numerous incidents. Mike was also a partner in OQA from the time that he retired from the Forest Service until just now. And he was an officer in our corporation. He was wonderful to teach with. He had a passion and he loved the students. And his objective was to help them learn. And you can't be any better than that. So I think about Mike and just talking with him. Normally drinking IPA when we did it. Talking about shotguns and hunting dogs. Skiing, friends, and telling lies about all the incidents. If I have visions of Mike, when I think about Mike, some things just are typical Mike. One of them, years ago, in a place called Big Bar in California, on a fire. And so I was going to visit Mike and Joe Stutler with their incident management team. And the smoke was so thick that I got lost twice on the highway trying to even find where they were at. I finally found their incident command post. It was in an old VFW hall. And the smoke was so thick that when you went inside of the hall, I couldn't see Mike across the room for the smoke in the room. And the fans were going on top of the ceiling, stirring the smoke up in big clouds inside the incident. That's the environment Mike lived in. I think about, we've already heard that Mike had patience and compassion, but once in a while, he'd get out of hand. So another time, up on the Okanagan and Wenatchee in northern Washington, our area command team had been on a number of fires, and it hadn't gone well. I think it was day 12, and we replaced an incident management team, and it was with Mike's team. And we'd really been working on strategies and how to control the fires and handle the political fallout. And Mike came in, and his hair was on fire, and he was wound up like a $3 watch. And we just spent 12 days figuring out how to work with all these fires. And Mike had a solution, and he started to preach it to us, and he was wound up. But Mike was pretty smart. He brought his deputy with him, and his deputy was Bob Gear, and Bob is known to be a low-key person who never gets excited. So the two of them, finally, I took them out in the parking lot and tried to settle them down, saying, you've got a lot of great tactical ideas, but this isn't about tactics. The fires were on DNR land, private land, timberland, and national forest. And Mike calmed down, but it took a little while. So he wasn't always just this really smooth running person. I think about Mike standing in the back of a Boston whaler with a left-handed fishing rod, fly rod, catching salmon. Probably as happy as I ever saw him. So I see Mike in a lot of different visions. If I think about Mike as an incident commander, he had a reputation when he had that interagency type 2 or local regional team. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you.
He had a reputation, and the team had the reputation. And we had a group called the Pacific Northwest Coordinating Group that would assign different teams to different incidents. And Mike had a reputation with his team. We gave him the hardest ones. So for those of you that were on that team, you wonder why you had to do the incident with the Rainbow family? That's why. We used to laugh in our meetings. We'd have something that was really, really a bad incident, and we'd go around the room and say, what team do we want to assign to that? And people would start to laugh. And they'd say, Mike Lohrey, we'll give it to Mike. Mike can do it. We did that throughout his whole career, and we never told the team. I always thought when I worked with Mike, when he was on these incidents, I had confidence because he'd do the right thing, not doing things right. Think about it, being Forest Service people. Did he read the manual and do it, or did he do the right thing? That's the way Mike worked. Mike also got a lot of credit. You can see lots of plaques and mementos up there. There's a lot more than that. But the one I think about with Mike that really spoke of his stature is we always had a co-chair for our National Incident Commander, Area Commander group that represented all the incident commands and area commands in the United States. And so Mike was appointed to that to do his turn in it. And he was so good, we finally made it a permanent position for him, took his other duties away, and that's what he did. That's what he did 12 months a year. He interfaced with Congress, interfaced with the National Wildfire Coordinating Group, and with the agencies, and he made a huge difference. It's the only time we've had one person do it permanently is their real job, and that was a real honor to Mike. And you had to have the right kind of person to do that. So with OQA, what we do is we do training, ICS training, exercises, program reviews for agencies. And Mike was an excellent teacher. He was a coach to the students. It wasn't just a job. He was a partner to all of us in the company. And he cared about what he did, and he cared about the people from fire services, from law enforcement, public works, public health. He really cared about making them better, that they could learn what Mike do so they'd be safer, do a better job, and save lives, including their own. So if I think about Mike, if I described him, I would say integrity, character, patience, professionalism, fun. Brave, he was a mentor, he loved his family. Honored, respectful, and dependable. And the way I'd sum it up with Mike, in the 1820s, there were some people that came from the east and lived in the west. And they were the first Anglos out here. And they worked along the rivers and the beaver dams. They made their living trapping. And along the rivers and the beaver dams was where it was good. It's where they made their living. It's where they lived. That's also where the danger was. From frostbite, hypothermia, fights with the people that really lived here. And so somebody by the name of Jim Ridger in 1820 gave an epitaph for somebody. And he said he was a good man to walk along the river with. Thank you.
I got to transition here in a second. I was on Mike's team when we had the national meeting on the Ochiko with the rainbows. Oh my God. I'm not going to present any images here, but maybe one. 450 north of that law enforcement incidents. 25,000 people on the 4th of July, of which something north of 10,000 didn't have clothes on. Okay. So, Mike and I and the command staff go out to read, welcome everybody on their national forest. Have a nice, safe day. It was hard on a lot of people because a lot of that, some people didn't agree with that, thought the agency should do something differently, but for me to help transition, that's 30-day assignment. It was amazing. All right, chapter 4. I can handle this one. Family. So, Mike had 2 sisters, Cindy and Michelle. Michelle's able to be with us today. So thank you so much for being here. Mike had 1 daughter, Jessica. Thank you so much for being here. Mike met Teresa in 2019. They married in 2020. And obviously, Jessica and Michelle want to thank all of you for being here. We're going to move on to, the part of honoring profession, son, hunting, fishing, fire stories, whatever. He's a great man, and we should be proud to have known him, be part of that life, and we should hold that dear and be strong about that. The tears are out of love. So we are going to think quick on my feet here. And is Paul here? We are now going to experience the Honor Guard flag folding ceremony.
Peace. Forward. March.
Let's take a few moments to simply be in the amazingness of Mike and also in the grace that Mike possessed. Each of us here and the people who are unable to be here, we do have a bit of a responsibility, and that is to do our parts to keep Mike alive with our stories, our reflections, sharing with one another, continuing to say his name, and that unites us not only in the memories, but also in honoring him and being in support of his family and one another. And oftentimes, I'm sure everyone's heard at weddings, it's like, okay, everybody in the audience has a bit of a job to do once the ceremony's over. And we all have that job to do, which is to reach out to one another in support, to reach out to Teresa, Jessica, other family members, and to be that support for one another. As I was considering a way to, not so much summarize, but reading that might encompass Mike's devotion, his leadership, bravery, and that grace, and so many qualities that he possessed. I landed upon this poem by Mary Oliver, and it's entitled, When Death Comes. When death comes, like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps the purse shut, when death comes like the measles pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And I look upon time as no more than an idea, and I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy and as singular. And each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending as all music does towards silence. And each body a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say, all my life, I was a bride married to amazement. I was a bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world.
It's pretty easy to recognize people with boots and green pants and whatever else they got on, but it became, for the community, now we're talking millions, we were recognized, supported. Their kindness was great. Appreciation, grasping for hope. We were there, yes, 30 days. Stories that last forever. We did make a difference. Bobby?
So my job here is to just tell you a little bit about what I experienced, what it was like to be in New York City for 9/11. Now many of us here were there, and we all had very different experiences. We were in different places. We might not have seen each other for the month that we were all working together. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I experienced, what I saw, and the images that I still have. When 9/11 occurred, I'd been a firefighter for 25 years already, half of that with the structure fire department and half of it with the Forest Service. I, like probably anyone here who's a first responder, when we saw what happened, we all wanted to be there to help. We felt an obligation. We felt an honor to be able to go. At the time, I wasn't on Team 2. I hadn't yet become a member of Team 2, and I was like a stowaway, literally getting to go to New York City. I had to lie and beg to go. I lied and said I was interested to be a planning section chief because Elton Thomas was the plans chief, I think, and I knew I could probably talk him into letting me go. And then as soon as I got there, Bob Gear knew I had no interest in being in plans, and he snagged me, and he lied to Elton and said that, oh yeah, well, Bobby will go back to plans, but I'm just going to take her with me to see what's going on down at the pile. I never ever went back to plans, and I spent every day working at the pile. The image of the pile, you've all seen pictures on the news, if you weren't there. Imagine, I don't know how many stories tall it was, the rubble. Now, while I was there, I kind of figured out that, each tower was about an acre in size, and there was 110 stories. So that's 110, 220 acres of concrete that were piled up. When that came down, the dust was everywhere. And if you think about the papers, one of the images in my head is that the papers were still blowing in the canyons of lower Manhattan weeks and weeks later. We were all, I think everybody who was working down at the pile was fitted with respirators, so we wouldn't breathe the dust. But I don't think anyone wore a respirator, in part because you couldn't wear a respirator for 16 hours a day working, and it was a different time. It was like the world had changed. And what's the point of worrying about breathing some dust when the whole world was collapsing? Our country was under attack. Every time we saw a plane fly over, everybody was ducking. So we didn't wear respirators. Now, where did the dust come from for weeks and months later? Well, that pile was on fire the whole time we were there. It was still burning. And the smoke entrained all the dust. So all the dust going up with that smoke column. There were, 10 master streams going on that pile the whole time we were there. That's like 500 GPM running 24 hours a day. And that pile was still burning, and that smoke was still going up. Now, you didn't really notice much during the daytime, as much, but when I went to night shift, all of a sudden, the spotlights on the pile, there were multiple giant spotlights on the pile, and you could now see all of the dust coming out of the air. It looked like it was snowing. It looked like snow was coming down, and we were breathing that snow. And at night, one of my experiences was that when I went to night shift, and the lights were on the pile, in the shadows across the street, you would be in the shadows, and I think maybe because I'm a woman, that the firefighters and the police officers would kind of come up next to you and stand next to you and say, were you here when it came down? No, I wasn't here. Oh, let me tell you what happened. And they would unburden themselves with horrible, horrible stories. Horrible stories. While we were there, they were still cutting out that metal exoskeleton of the towers, you know, you guys remember what that looked like. Well, that metal framework was still stuck in the buildings around the towers. Besides the 2 towers that came down, then there was a building on the north side that had been smashed, and there were multiple smaller buildings on the, I guess it'd be the east side of the towers that were smashed. But that big giant, that metal framework were sticking into the towers or buildings next door, so around the site. So the welders were up there cutting the giant girders that were still stuck in the buildings across the street. And in that process, they sometimes would start a fire. So the welders would start a fire in the building that hadn't collapsed. And now the fire department, in addition to the pile, now they've got to fight a fire in the adjacent buildings. Every one of us, all of you that were there, we all had different experiences. The team members that were working in logistics, and I don't know everyone else that was doing it, but they turned an 80,000 acre, empty, dirty, dusty warehouse, wharf, into a functioning warehouse. And those folks they weren't at the pile every day. They were doing incredibly hard work. I don't want to say they didn't get the glory and honor of being down at the pile, but they were doing hard work without being there at the site. Everybody had different experiences, but I just want you to appreciate what the south part of Manhattan was like. The dust and the papers were blowing for months afterwards. Thanks.
Those of you that know me know I'm a numbers guy. Floors crushed to about 10 inches. We had 70 feet of the building above ground, about 70 feet below. That's the impact of that particular building. When we were assigned, we had thought there were 10,000 lives lost, and as information became available, the number was south of 3,000. But every person there was seeking to find their loved one scattered on all the fences. You know, and so you have to wrap your mind around this. What can we do to bring hope? How can we organize? How can we take 20, forget, Bob will keep me straight, but I think it was 22 agencies that we had to get to be on the same plan, the same set of objectives. We got to pull the rope the same way in a culture where their model was you put more people and resources in, it'll go away. And it was at that break point when we were able to show an opportunity for them to say yes, to put a plan together that we can start making sense out of what was all there. And it took a tough decision on day 30 or 31 to stop rescue and go to recovery. That's when we had 27 cranes. That's when there was over 1,000 union people cutting metal. I mean, the scope and scale, we just needed to take a deep breath. And through Mike's leadership, Bob's leadership, I think we'll share that with every single one of us that went. What can we do to make a difference? And what can we do to bring pride, success, hope? And we did well. We did. Many followed us because the job was not in a container. You know, it's not one of those things, you know, sad reality, as we know right now, this moment, 23 and a half years later, there's consequences that occurred. You may or may not know 1,000 people have lost their lives since then. Over 1,000 people. Immediately in that area, or responders, but what I would say, everyone looking you in the eye, it was our honor, it was our privilege, and we do it again. To help with you and help you know that that's what Mike would believe. So please, please, please realize he would believe and would want you to know it was an honor. So Mike.
Thank you, David. Hello.
Hello.
For those who don't know me, my name is Mike Ferris. I was the Public Information Officer on PNW Team 2 for the whole tenure that Mike was our incident commander. And not that Mike wasn't a public affairs challenge, but, you know, we always seemed to get through it. Actually, he was quite good at what he did with the press and with the community. If it's okay with the family, I'd like to ask the PNW Team 2 members to stand that are here today. Thank you. My estimation, David, and his numbers, we averaged about 4 assignments a year. And over a 6-year period, that was 24 incidents. So, and you figure those were anywhere from 14 to 21 days. That was mostly our summers, and we really did enjoy it. Otherwise, why would we be there, right? So we were a family, giving up our summers with our families to spend time with Mike and the team. The other day, actually last week, David called and asked if I would be willing to read a tribute that Mike wrote back in 2009 in regards to 9/11. And of course, I was a little bit hesitant, and after just looking at the write-up, I was more than eager to do that. So thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity. I guess Teresa found this write-up going through Mike's papers, which I can imagine there must have been a lot, because I know I have quite a few boxes at home. Let me begin. And also, just I left copies on the table over there if anybody would like one. September 11, 2001, a day filled with disbelief, anger, and heroism. A day the U.S. found itself vulnerable. A day filled with uncommon valor, punctuated by hopelessness and resolve. The firefighters and police officers of New York City responded in a way that defines the very essence of true heroes. They ran in while others ran out. The citizens of United Airlines Flight 93 responded in the same manner. Knowing their fate, they acted to prevent another disaster. The law enforcement and firefighting community from across the country responded. Thousands of volunteers, urban search and rescue teams, incident management teams, and wildland firefighters, in the form of hotshot crews, all heeded the call and came to the aid where the need was the greatest. The overwhelming task of search, rescue, and recovery at the former site of the World Trade Center. We know we were honored to be tasked to assist. Words and pictures are feeble for describing the scene. Sights, smells, and the magnitude of the task at hand, it truly looked hopeless. But the resolve, the urgency, the will to overcome united all of those working on the POW, and the debris being hauled to Staten Island prevailed, And to today, the task is complete. The task is complete, but the scars remain. Families, friends, and acquaintances now only memories. This day, the 8th Patriots Day, is a time to reflect on the unknown sacrifices that emergency workers make every day and the extraordinary ones they made on September 11, 2001. For the families, friends, co-workers, and fallen heroes, we will never forget. Written by Mike Lohrey, September 2009. Thank you.
So currently 1/3 of the PW team that was there have passed or have health issues. For Mike, on November of 2022, returning from a hunting trip, he started having health issues, found himself in the emergency room, found himself in ICU. 2.5-year journey. May 2024, double lung transplant. March 14th, he passed away. We will never forget, okay? We will never forget, please. The family really, really wants to thank each and every one of you for attending. They know you had a choice. Your opportunity to be here is just so, so heartfelt. They want to encourage each and every one of you to stay. There's a caterer that will have food, there's drinks available, but most importantly, continue to share stories. Share your piece of your love of Mike, what's important, and let's make sure that the whole Mike is filled in this room and that he sees and hears the love from all of us. And it's now for the National Guard to close the ceremony.
Retrieve. Retrieve. Ready. Face. Forward. March. That ends the ceremony. Free hugs over here. Let's go.